Hey man, welcome to the BeDADitudes. I'm Dr. Greg Popcak, and this is episode 15. Blessed are the dads who are merciful to their wives. In the last episode, we were talking about what mercy actually is and how it helps to order our relationship with our Heavenly Father. And just as a reminder, mercy is any act that treats another person in a manner that reminds them of their worth in God's eyes. Right. So whether we're talking about the corporal or spiritual works of mercy, corporal works of mercy being things like feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, giving drink to the thirsty, sheltering the homeless, visiting the sick and imprisoned, burying the dead, or the spiritual works of mercy, instructing the ignorant, counseling the doubtful, admonishing sinners, bearing wrongs patiently, forgiving willingly, comforting the afflicted, and praying for the living and the dead. All of those things, they seem like a very different list of things, right? But they all, when you boil it all down, just give examples of specific ways that we treat others in a manner that reminds them of their dignity and worth in God's eyes. And so that's ultimately what mercy is. And we talked before about, in our relationship with God, how we can make sure that we are having a merciful outlook on our own faults and failures using the COAL acronym that was developed by Dr. Daniel Siegel, where we approach our own weaknesses and struggles with an attitude of curiosity, openness, acceptance, and love, and what that actually means. This time we want to look, though, at how this beatitude, the BeDADitude, blessed are the dads who are merciful, orders our relationship with our wife. What does it mean to be merciful to our wife? And I'm sure, lots of things, right? You could look at all seven of the corporal and spiritual works of mercy. But I want to look at three specific practices that I think get to the heart of at least laying down a basic framework of mercy in our relationship with our wife. And those things involve being demonstrative with our love, serving with joy, and three, bearing wrongs patiently and forgiving willingly. Let's talk about what each of those three things mean. Being demonstrative with our love. This one, a lot of men struggle with this because we were raised to believe that it was somehow not manly to be affectionate, that it's somehow, that's a woman thing. But I don't believe that for a second. Jesus, the Word of God became flesh and dwelt among us so that we could experience God's love through our senses. It would have been enough for the King of the universe to just love us from a distance, to say, I built the world for you. I go to work every day. I make everything work. What more do you want from me? But he emptied himself. And he took on flesh, and he walked among us, and he laughed, and he cried with us, and he suffered and died for us and rose again. And even after he ascended to the Father, he still gave us the sacraments so that we could experience his love through our senses. One of the practices in Catholic home, in the liturgy of domestic church life under the first rite of the rite of Christian relationship, is extravagant affection and affirmation. And when fathers take the lead in this, we really set the tone for the household that says, you are worth me giving myself to you. We tend to love the people in our lives through the things we do. And we say, well, my love language is acts of service, fine, but really we give ourselves to each other through those expressions that we share through our embodied love, the physical affection, the affirmations, the paying attention and noticing and being present, so that idea of being generous with our affection, being demonstrative of our love, it really means being present. The other thing that we tend to fall into as men is, we value physical intimacy, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's actually a wonderful thing. But we tend to just go toward that without making sure that we're attending to all the other kinds of affection throughout the day. So we kind of go from completely ignoring our wives and having kind of a functional or transactional relationship where it's just, I'll do this for you, you do this for me. What do you need to have done? What needs to be taken care of? Okay, I'll go do that. Which is all loving. That's all good, but it's not affectionate, right? And it doesn't communicate that love really. to wanting to have sex. And it can be kind of a big leap, right? In order to bridge that gap, being demonstrative of our love means cherishing our spouse. Well, and our kids too, but we'll get to that. But for right now, since we're focusing on our spouse, being demonstrative of affection for our spouse. I like to make a distinction between loving and cherishing people. Loving somebody means working for their good. And we do that all day, whether it's just bringing home the money that pays for things, to serving around the house, to doing the things, right? That's all love, that is. But it's different from cherishing. Cherishing are those acts that show you how special and precious you are to me. And so by being demonstrative of our love, by cherishing our wife, by building her up, by being affectionate, by being affirming, by giving those sincere compliments, by looking for ways that we can encourage her and let her know that we think she's wonderful, and that she's irreplaceable in my life, that I think she's amazing, and why. Thanking her for the things that she does, but praising her for who she is and all those qualities that made us fall in love with her, and reminding her of those things still exist. And taking a moment out of the busyness of our day to call attention to that and say, I still feel about you the way I did when we first met. And I still see those things in you that I first saw, even more so. I mean, how beautiful is that, right? So making sure that we're taking time to be demonstrative of our love, not just in sexual ways, not just in ways that say, I want you to give something back to me, but in ways that say, I cherish you. I recognize how special you are and how wonderful you are and how beautiful you are and all the gifts that you have. And I'm proud to be your husband, and I'm so grateful that you're my bride. That's number one, and again, how does that show mercy? Well, it reminds her of her dignity and worth in God's eyes. God, who has the busiest schedule in the universe, loves each and every one of us as a unique and unrepeatable person. According to St. John Paul's theology of the body, each of us is a unique and unrepeatable person who is loved by God, not just as a whole, but individually. And when we cherish our bride, when we are demonstrative of our love in ways that build our wife up, that remind her of how beautiful, precious, special, wonderful she is more open then to experiencing God's love through us. And that's why God gave us to our wife, and why God gave our wife to us, so that we could be physical reminders of the love that he has in his heart for each of us. When my wife looks at me, she ought to be able to say, I know God loves me, because nobody could love me like my husband does if there wasn't a God and if he didn't love me. And vice versa. I mean, we ought to be able to say that about our wives too, but since we're talking about BeDADitudes, we're going to focus on you guys. And even if you don't feel that from your wife, the best way to inspire it is to lead by demonstrating this affection and love and affirmation in ways that invite it in return, ultimately, in ways that really communicate how much we cherish our bride. The second practice under this BeDADitude of blessed are the dads who are merciful, and especially how it is playing out in our marriages, refers to serving with joy. There's something called emotional labor. And what that means is that 10% of the task is doing the task. Right? So any task at all, if there's something to be done, doing the task represents about 10% of the task. The other 90% is in the category that we call emotional labor. It's the emotional energy it takes to identify that the task needs to be done, make time on the schedule to do the task, gather the resources that enable me to complete the task, follow up to make sure the task is getting done, make sure that the task stays done. All that emotional energy that goes into all the parts of planning and gathering and implementing and enacting and then checking up on, that's the 90% of the work. And so we have a tendency a lot of times to do what we're told. Right? As men, I'll just sort of sit here and wait until you tell me to do the thing. And then I did the thing. And what are you complaining about? But that still is only 10% of the task. And then we do it grudgingly, right? I did the thing. Now what? Can I sit down now? Can I do the thing I want to do now? And there's nothing wrong with needing time to rest. There's nothing wrong with wanting to do the things that you want to do. But it's a matter of how we approach that, right? So the first step, again, is serving with joy. What can I do to help? Not just waiting for that, looking around and doing the thing. When I was in Scouts, we were also always supposed to leave our campsite better than we found it. I think it's a good practice as men in adulthood. How do we leave every room a little bit better than we found it? Do we leave our spouse and our kids a little better than we found them? Do we, as we walk through the house, are we being aware of the things that need to be done to just kind of straighten this picture frame, to pick up that dish, that cup that was left on the table, to wash it, to put it away, to put away those socks that were on the, whatever, to look in the room and say, what's one small thing I can do to just make it better? To leave this room better than I found it, because that's serving with joy. It's not just a matter of when our wife asks us to do something, being cheerful about it, although it does involve that too. It's about being aware and sharing in that emotional labor. And again, how does that communicate mercy? Well, it shows my wife how precious she is in God's eyes, how beautiful she is in God's eyes, because I'm taking the time. God gave me to her, right? And he put me there to remind her of her dignity in God's eyes. And when I help her out and when I share her burden, when I don't just wait to be told what to do, but I actively look for ways to share that burden, I'm cherishing her. I'm helping her see her worth and her dignity, because she's worth taking time out of my day to do the things that she needs me to do without being asked, and certainly without being asked twice. And so that serving generously and serving with joy is truly an important part of mercy, because those acts really do remind my wife of her dignity and worth in God's eyes. If she's not even worth the time it takes for me to look around a room and try to straighten some stuff up, pick some things up, ease her burden in some way, make that call that needs to be made, do that thing that needs to be done without being told, or certainly without being told twice, how is she ever supposed to appreciate how much God loves her? And that goes doubly for any time she asks me to do something. It's easy to be grumpy. I mean, I can be grumpy just like everybody else when Lisa asks me to do something. Right before this, our water heater went out, in fact, and she was, can you come downstairs and help me with, moving some boxes around so the plumber can get in there, and I had to check myself from going, I have so much to do. Oh my gosh, I can't believe you asked me this. And instead I kind of took a breath and it was like, absolutely, honey, I'll be right there, but that took real discipline on my part. It wasn't easy, and so we have to kind of practice that sometimes and just recognize that, that the how we agree to do things matters even more than doing them a lot of times. The face we show, I can't tell you how many women I talk to in the pastoral counseling practice who, will say, I just hate asking my husband for anything because I get the eye roll and I get the, can't you just do it? Or yeah, I'll be there. And then he never comes. And what ultimately happens is that she stops asking. Now that's what we want secretly. We want her to stop asking. But what happens then is our intimacy starts to die. Because intimacy, I don't just mean sexual intimacy, although I do mean that. I mean intimacy on every level. Because intimacy is directly dependent on how much you feel you can count on me. Right? If I don't feel like I can count on you, you don't feel like you can count on me, we don't have that intimacy, because intimacy grows out of the gratitude and the relief that comes from knowing that you're there for me, that you have my back, you're showing up for me. And if I'm not cheerful when you ask me to do things, if I don't, and again, I don't mean that you have to have a big old smile on your face and jump up and down and say, "Yay, I get to do the thing," but to be reasonably pleasant, and to be involved, to be engaged, and not have to be dragged to do it. That when you're asked to do things, you follow through on it. Having that attitude that I want to serve you, I want to be here for you. Because again, when I have that attitude, I'm communicating your dignity and worth in God's eyes. I'm being merciful. And the more I'm able to do that, the more she can trust me, the more she can rely on me, the more she knows that I have her back and that she wants to be close to me because I'm the one person that she can count on consistently to show up and be there. I might have mentioned this in a previous episode, but there's research on what makes marriages great by Dr. John Gottman. He's probably the world's most well-known marriage researcher. And you may have even heard at some point somebody talk about the 5-to-1 ratio of positive to negative interactions in marriage. That's actually not entirely correct. It's 5-to-1 in conflict. That happy couples maintain a positive to negative interaction ratio of 5-to-1 when they're disagreeing with each other. So in other words, they're 5 times still more affirming and encouraging and supportive than they are criticizing or complaining or nagging or threatening in some way. But in the same research shows that couples have to maintain a 20-to-1 ratio of positive to negative interactions in order for their relationship to be happy overall. And how joyfully we serve has a lot to do with that ratio. Because if I know that 48 times out of 50 you have my back, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt those other 2 times, and I'm going to trust you, and I'm going to open up to you, and I want to be close to you. And so the more we're able to cherish our spouse by serving generously and serving joyfully, the more intimacy will increase between us, because I am there for you. The last point that I'll share with you is the idea of bearing wrongs patiently and forgiving willingly. This is a tough one in general, but especially with our wife. But bearing wrongs patiently and forgiving willingly does not mean letting things go. All right. Bearing wrongs patiently refers to not reacting to every offense, to not reacting to every slight, to learning to kind of take a pause and just take that breath and not snap back every time she snaps at me, and to not lash out whenever she's thoughtless or rude to me. I'm not saying I can't address it. I can address it, but the time to address it is not in that second, right, where she says that thing that pushes my button and I lash back out at her. No, what I can do is I can take that hit, if you will. And then later on, if she doesn't correct herself, like later on, she might come back and say, I'm sorry I was snappish before. I'm sorry I was short tempered with you. I'm sorry I lost patience. I was just having a rough morning. It's all right, honey. I appreciate it. She can come back and self correct if I just take that beat. But sometimes, if she doesn't, let's say it's been a rough day and I've just come bearing that wrong patiently over and over again. I'm getting worn out from it, but I haven't reacted. I can come back to her at the end of the day and I can say, honey, I've really seen that it's been a rough day for you, and I've been trying to give you some space and not react to the things you've been doing, but you really hurt my feelings a lot today. What's going on? See, I have the credibility to address that then, because I've borne those wrongs patiently throughout the day. I've taken the hits, and I can come back to her and I say, I don't mind taking a hit once in a while, but I'm starting to feel a little like a punching bag. What's going on? How can we work through this? And it gives me the credibility to bring those things up, as opposed to if she says something that's hurtful or offensive and I pick at her right away, and then I pick at her again, and I pick at her again, and I pick at her again. And then I want at the end of the day what's going on here? Well, you've been picking on me all day. That's what's been going on here. It's like, no, I haven't been picking on you. You've been picking on me. And we fight back and forth with each other. But if you bear that wrong patiently and give it a little space, think about how you want to respond to it, give her some space to self-correct, things go a lot more smoothly. Forgiving willingly. That has to do with Saint Augustine said that forgiveness is when we surrender our natural desire for revenge. Right? When I stop wanting to hurt you for having hurt me. That doesn't mean that everything's all better. It doesn't mean I should forget the offense. It doesn't mean I shouldn't try to work things out. But it means that I'm going to go out of my way to not hurt you for having hurt me. So forgiving willingly, means that I'm going to give you that grace. And even when you do something that's hurtful, I'm going to try to look for ways to make your day a little easier or more pleasant. Not necessarily because I feel like doing it, but because it needs to be done. And when I do that consistently, again, that builds up the credibility for me to come back to you later if you haven't self-corrected and say, hey, honey, I'd really like to talk about this because this really hurt my feelings, or this is really frustrating for me, and I need your help in working this out. And I have the credibility to do it because I haven't been harping on her all day. I haven't been lashing back out at her. I haven't been looking for ways to tick her off or withdrawing from her because, she's in a mood, I'm just going to stay away. The more I do that, the more I'm not working for her good in spite of those offenses, the more I'm not forgiving willingly, the more I'm hurting her for having hurt me. And then she knows that she can only count on me to show up for her when things are going perfectly. And nobody wants a friend like that. That's not even a friend, right? So those three things, those three practices are simple ways that we as men can live out that call to mercy in our marriages being demonstrative with our love and affection and affirmation, serving with joy and serving generously, and finally, bearing those wrongs patiently and forgiving willingly. Again, doesn't mean that we can't bring things up. It goes to giving each other the space that we need to make it safe to make mistakes, and then coming back to address those things that haven't just taken care of themselves with time. The more we can demonstrate mercy toward our spouse, the more that we will experience God's mercy for us and more mercy in our marriage. The freer it will be to treat each other in a manner that reminds us of of our dignity in God's eyes. Thanks for tuning in.